My name is Josie Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us tonight Mr. Harry Gross, who is employed as the research director at the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. And as I mentioned before, he has, interests that coincide with that of the Democratic Party, which is a little bit unusual in this part of the world in some circles. So I'm joking, actually, Harry, but maybe it depends on your circle.
I've lived Democratic authority in the city for many years.
That's a little joke. That's a little tongue-in-cheek sarcasm. But anyway, it's good to have you with us, Harry, and there are lots of things we could talk about. And we've talked some about President Trump and some of his policies, which I would modestly say are earth-shaking. There are huge things he's doing. He's doing huge things in the first 2 months. Maybe it's similar to the New Deal, right? I know that's sacred. Well, no, I mean,
the Antichrist of the New Deal.
Well, right, maybe. I mean, you don't like his policies, but my comment is there are really extreme things that happen. It's not so common to have such extreme things happen. And you can make the case, or he's making it. Well, Franklin Roosevelt had to do this to save the country from depression. And Trump might say, well, I have to do these things to save the country from various demons, wokeism, the economy in Germany, whatever. I mean, whatever he's adopting extreme policies. And I would say that's a fair statement. The same way that when Franklin Roosevelt did what he did. For the time, you could say, well, people...
As a New Deal Democrat, I will proudly claim that extremism as a model. I don't think liberals have dirty word here. I don't. I think liberals have done more for this country than anything else.
The question is, I won't get distracted, but who's a liberal? I'll let that go. I'm not going to go there.
Donald Trump.
Because that's a confused word. And traditional liberals are other creatures than people imagine.
Liberal defies party affiliation.
So
Abraham Lincoln was a liberal.
That's the way words change. I want to get off this. So one word may say this, one period, and I have that word, but it's not the same word for me. I'll let it go with that. Well, I am going to get into this subject, the extreme things that have been done. And right now, we're on the cusp of, maybe chatting about this before, major tariff changes, tremendous tariff changes.
Yes.
And this is like earth-shaking. It is probably one of the biggest events, wants to say this, possibly since World War II. That's how big it could be. It could really totally reshape the world order. You could have an incredible, extraordinary event. It could cause a lot of things. It could cause things not here. It could cause a lot. One of the things that should be thought about is what happens in other countries where their economy depends on the largesse that U.S. trade offers them and their people. It's such a huge, huge, big deal. There are 8 billion people here. It's really, really, really a big deal. That's for the world and for our purposes and what goes on here, which we can discuss. There are all sorts of events that possibly could be negative. And I know that President Trump touts some positive things, which he's certainly can be discussed, and there could be some positive things that happen. I mean, I'll take that point. But a bigger question, I think, is to start with the rights under how he did this. So other countries, when I talk to Europeans and talk to someone else, they think, well, this is what, I don't know, the King of Sweden would have done in 1850 or something. So an authoritarian figure could do this. And they imagine that that's the system we have here. And if you think about it, it's really quite extreme. It is a big deal where the president, for reasons that are subtle, can basically blow up the world order by himself with all our checks and balances that exist. So that, to me, is a puzzlement. And the question to ask is, if you can speak to this, how did he get this authority?
There was Congress temporarily gave the president, I believe during maybe a decade ago, the ability to declare emergency tariffs. There's a specific limit. Yes, that was supposed to be what it is. Otherwise, Congress is supposed to be responsible for any tariff administration. That ability was never revoked. And I know there are some Senate Republicans who've discussed revoking that approval as a way of trying to regain some sense of control. Because there is a strong argument to be made that President Trump has exceeded the legal mandate he has to do what he's done.
It really, as I understand it, the legislation that allows him to assume this power, this enormous world, bringing down the world temple. That's how powerful it is. It's an unbelievable event. It really, really, really is. And it resonates not just with us, but everywhere. And the whole system of world government, everything is, and you could say maybe this is understandable. When I've spoken about the way the brain functions, and the normal thing is, well, I'm not going to, my instinct is to extract things for my own benefit. It's hard for me to be charitable to other people when I have my own needs, or maybe something like that. And, in any event, this seems to be what's going on. And right now, one of the things that's apparently happening in the U.S. Senate is the idea is pulling Canada out of this. I will now speak about Canada. And I rarely use extreme language, or have you heard maybe occasionally? But I think this is one of the nuttiest, stupidest, dumb, I can't even say how stupid it is, to our buddies up in Canada, who have been our friends for decades, and part of the great North Atlantic community, part of North America, really our brothers and sisters. There are all kinds of cultural similarities. I know they're rock stars or whatever. They've got their own idiosyncrasies. I don't know if I would necessarily agree with all their government arrangements, but they generally are American well-wishers, and they for no. And the question I'll ask is this, and the reason I'm asking is presumably the Republican Party is going to possibly pull Canada out of this, saying that there's no extreme measure to put these tariff penalties on the Canadians. There's no. What is the extreme measure? And the ridiculous thing about it, in my opinion, which needs to be a public discussion, and I'm proud to do that here, is that it's for the fentanyl use, and that thousands of fentanyl drugs are pouring in from Canada, millions of people, and as contrasted with Mexico. Mexico might well make a case, but not Canada. There's just an occasional.
There's less fentanyl that crosses the Canberra each year than is like a United States daily.
And you could also make the case, which is not commonly made, those are our citizens. There's something wrong with them. And so our culture is producing people that are potentially going to expose their welfare to deadly narcotics. And how is our culture like that? Is there something wrong with our culture? So, which is never discussed. And other countries might say this. I'm sure they, of course they do. Well, we're going to make some fentanyl, and those America's loaded with whatever terrible, disgusting people that will kill themselves with it. And maybe that will help the U.S. economy or something.
China's one of the leading producers of fentanyl in the world.
I know. But
there's great power competition on the drug war.
That point aside, it doesn't look like there is an emergency on the Canadian border with fentanyl. There is not an emergency. Let me repeat that. The Canadians did everything they could to prevent that. And they did. And so, what on earth is going on? This is like not rational. This is not rational. So if you're going to use this power, there must be some other reason you're doing it, but it has many negative impacts. In my opinion, the American people, if they understood the circumstance, would not do this to start with. And the Canadian, presumably the Republican Party, enough people are going over to the Democrats, and then to pass, and then presumably the same thing will take place in the House of Representatives. And the question is going to be, I'm assuming this, I'm assuming that would be the case. I can be wrong. My opinion is probably would be the case. And then President Trump might have to veto that. But that shows you that is a really, really bad set of circumstances. The other thing it says is that all kinds of nebulous laws and regulations exist. They're just floating around. So if you wanted the aphrodisiac of power, and you were sitting in the White House, and you could send your lawyers in, find something that I can do something about something to somebody. And they could come up with some regulation, something. And it would be the job of the courts to stop this going on. So one of the issues right now is, and we discussed the courts earlier, but what can be done with the courts to do something and just to stop this use of power in the hands of the president to do this world changes. And that's just the first question to ask. If they've got the power, if he possesses the power, an unassailable power to do this, which I'm sure is not the case. We can move past that. But what do you think about that?
I think that the courts will have to rule on the limits of that power, because there is going to be limits. There are going to be clear limitations to language. Unfortunately, this is where we get into the downside of all of this, because as much as I love being on the same side of you as you want to do here, I think that where we're going to run into issues is whether Congress will actually take the reins back. I think because they're the ones who are going to have to. That's ultimately where it will be, is that I think you're right. I think Trump will veto anything that comes from the Senate or the House. I think he'll face a not quite a civil war, but clear fractious split within the Republican Party over what to do about this, because there are going to be some who are going to go with President Trump on everything, no matter what. Then there's going to be, I think, a lot more who are going to want to cross over, but it's going to be bitter. And then you're going to have to figure out a veto-proof majority to take that power back. Ultimately, like I said, I'm a New Deal Democrat. I believe in the power of a strong, centralized executive branch. At the same time, that centralized power has largely been aggrandized because of congressional inaction. Congress has abandoned its raison d'etre in many ways to be the lawmaking power of the Senate, and that has opened the door to the expansion of presidential power. And there's a strong argument to reining that in for both Republicans and Democrats.
Well, that's like the imperial presidency. It goes back a long way. I mean, we can really go that direction a lot. But let me push the discussion in this direction. I sort of made these points before, I believe. But okay, so we're going to have this enormous world change. And we can start off by just saying, before we get to the U.S., that's going to screw the world up. Let's not talk about the U.S. Let's forget the U.S. So all kinds of things are going to get screwed up. Yep. And so, for instance, in Mexico, if you have there are no jobs, the U.S. border is there, I'll risk anything to get there. And I'll come across, I'll swim through shark-infested waters. Millions of people will do that. People will fight each other, they'll kill each other, there won't be enough food, war will break out. It will be easy to have famines. And also plagues. But when this world disruption of 8 billion people, all of that is bad. And then one of the things going on right now is the whole reason to do this is for the U.S. citizens. And the reason being, we've been ripped off. And now I will now criticize words. We're not getting numbers here. We're getting a word. And so it would be easy to tell a person, these bad people have been ripping you off. I guess that's okay with you, right? Is that okay if they come in here and step on your foot and, I don't know, burn your house down or throw you in the snow or kill your dog? They're going to come in here. It's okay if they want to kill your dog, and I'll protect you. I'm your protector. I'm going to make sure, all right, great, they're doing that. The question is, how about some numbers? What are the numbers about whatever this policy is going to do? I haven't heard any numbers. That's bad. I've heard that $600 billion is going to take place. I've heard that the tariff policy is against the U.S. interest. I've heard those things. And so we're going to make the tariff policy better for our interest. And a question to ask is, okay, we have a better tariff policy after all that, a fairer tariff policy. What exactly does that mean for the economic welfare of the country? I'll give you the football.
It means we all lose. I mean, that's what it means. We all lose globally.
Why don't you talk about that?
So the proposed revenue of these tariffs is going to be something, it's supposedly going to be $600 billion. The mental math behind that's lacking in a lot of variables. It's probably at best going to come out to be $250, $300 billion at best, because it doesn't take into account any of the reactions of consumers across across the board.
What's funny is that a 20%
across the board tariff. That's what supposedly is.
So right now, whatever, we have $600 billion, and so what does that mean? We've got a couple of trillion in trade. So a couple of $1 trillion is coming into the
country. About $3.3 trillion.
The government is going to take 20% of it or something like that.
Well, it's going to add 20% to the cost of that. And so
it's putting a tax on it.
It's putting a tax. And so consumers are going to have to pay higher prices because importers are going to raise the price. If they don't, then they run the risk of losing out on profits, having to cut jobs.
They may split. I mean, I've said this before. So what the people could do is they could say, well, I made 10% profit on this, and I'm just going to cut it to 5%. I'll raise it by, I'll raise the price, of course, but I'll at least take some of the hit myself.
I would love to see corporate responsibility like that. But in my experience, corporate responsibility is not the name of the game in American capitalism. Corporate responsibility is only to its shareholders. That's the legal opinion.
The people that are the corporations are in other countries. They're not you. So are those Swedes? Are they equally as rapacious?
Sometimes they are. My point is, but let's look at the rest of the world. But in terms of American companies, right, you have importing companies, right, face two choices. Either they pass on all that 20% cost to consumers and keep their profit margins, or they take some of the hit. And what taking some of that hit means, right, is that you might potentially have to cut jobs. You might potentially have to. No, in the United States.
Well, that's if the
Swedish companies aren't paying this unless they're importing it into the United States.
Let me try this point again here. It's nice Swedish people, they make Volvos or whatever. They send the Volvo in, and there's like $1,000 on it. The government increases the price by $1,000. They understand they can't sell as many cars, so they're a little bit accommodative. So they decrease to some degree their profit margin. You don't think that's
no, because they don't pay either. Now they might see sales fall, or consumers might be able to pay that much.
If you're a Volvo dealer and you're trying to do the deal, you call the people in Sweden and you say, look, we can't sell these cars. There's a $10,000 price up. What can you do for me? And they say, well, we've got $1,000 profit. We're going to drop our profit to some degree, and we have $500. We won't have $1,000.
And if they do that, then they won't be able to compete with Audi or with Mercedes.
I really think that's the case.
I really don't think that such corporate politics are going to be the response. Especially because what Volvo's going to say is, why should we be punished for what American politicians are doing? We're not going to punish our people. We're not going to cut our stuff. We're going to keep selling.
So the option is to close the factory in Sweden and lose money. So I'm the corporate treasurer. What are we going to do here? What are we going to do? If half a cake is better than no cake. So we'll get, it won't be as profitable. We'll still get a little money. We'll see what we can do, and we'll think about it. But they won't just stop sending cars here. They just won't stop it. So some of the burden, I really think this is the case. Some of the burden is going to go to the exporter of things here. The same way, just to go through this, that if you're you haven't really gotten into this, all the negative complexities about what's happening here, the millions of negative complexities. But one of them is if you're manufacturing, I don't know, what's in America called Fords. You have a Ford here, you manufacture it, and you're going to send the Ford to Guatemala or somewhere like that. And so formally you send it down there, you had $1,000 profit, and the Guatemalans say, well, you're now going to have to pay us $1,000 when you come down here. Well, the Ford company is still going to, it's the same thing, half a cake or whatever the deal is. They'll say the Guatemalan people will pay the extra $1,000, but if they don't
have $1,000, you're not incorporating purchasing power here. The United States doesn't have purchasing power than its consumers, because the costs that are going to be borne are going to be borne by the importers. Now, they might pass those into the United States. Now, when we're talking about reciprocal tariffs, that's a whole other thing. But regardless, what we're talking here, even if we have shared responsibility, right? Let's say in this analogy, which for the record I think it's absurd, but let's say in entertainment, if Volvo, let's say, takes 20% of the hit, 80% of the hit still has to go to the consumer in the United States. Either way, the ultimate ending, we can debate all these ins and outs, of course, but the ultimate ending is we are staring at a future of economic disaster. We are looking at higher prices. We're looking at lost jobs. We are looking at economic growth recession, literally. I mean, we are staring stagflation in the face, and all of the gains since 2008 are going to be erased.
Okay, so, Harry,
everybody's going to be worse off.
I'll just go through that a little bit. So one of the issues is, in regards to this, that Trump has said these are going to be permanent tariffs. And we went through it before. He wants to bring plates, that sort of thing. So if one of the alleged things that should happen, which is not easily going to happen, a benefit that allegedly will take place is that the Volvo people are going to build plants here, as many places they have, etc. They'll build plants, they'll do that, or whatever. But to do that takes a long period of time, and it also takes a workforce that's not here. So it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a very. That's the point. I take that point well. It's a complimentary point. But the takeaway message is we've got this difficult situation. And it's going to be hard to put extra plants there to take up the deal to make additional stuff. So it really is extremely complicated and vexing, and it's going to cause a lot of labor disturbances in the country. Now, finally, one reason that he's saying this is permanent, and I think this is an important issue in this whole deal, is many people are not going to think it is permanent. And one reason they're not going to think it is permanent is that the country is going to flip back to the left whenever they get a chance, just because the system is not going to be effective. And so I wouldn't. I'm considering putting a plan here. I'm going to put a plan here, maybe. And it looks like the next election is whatever it is. Something maybe all these events are going to make capital investment extremely difficult. And the way the system is being disturbed so much, there's a lot of stuff on the way, big, huge disturbance. So I'm going to be restrained about trying to make up for the absence of Volvos here. It's going to be difficult, and so that's another issue here. So we have at least many arguments that are out there about how effective this policy is going to be, and one of the other things, I won't get off subject, but this is like a 19th century argument about and maybe justifying it. Maybe the only way you could justify this would be that we're expecting to go to war with Canada or whoever. War is coming, and we're going to have all our overseas resources cut off. The Chinese submarines will blow things up. We won't be able to get anything. We have to have everything in our own country when the war comes. I mean, maybe that would be sort of a left-handed story. And it means we're not going to have a pleasant world out there. And each country will be that way. They'll have their own self-sufficiency. And we won't be able to sell anything anywhere else. I mean, that's going to be an issue. And then all of the negative impacts that are going to take place are legion and, in my opinion, not well documented. So one of the big deals, I think, would be the U.S. reserve currency to start with. So the U.S. reserve currency, many people are going to challenge that. And one of the things going on now, if you're getting rich watching the stock market, I don't know, but a little joke is the gold bugs are out there. So national banks are saying, the Guatemalan National Bank is saying, that's a screwed up country there. I'd rather back the Guatemalan peso with gold. So they're buying a lot of gold, they're trying to do whatever. Maybe they'll flip to Chinese currencies. But the other point that makes things weaker, besides all the distress that's there, it's going to be when people they try and export or whatever, coffee. I'm on Valdez, I'm sending coffee in, and it's going to be a 20% tariff on coffee. That's going to diminish coffee production, and the inflation story is going to go up. And I'll make one comment, and I'll give you the flip. which is it's thought that is this going to cause inflation or is it going to cause depression? And actually, it is a combination of both. So when people say, well, this is going to be inflationary, okay, well, it sounds reasonable it would be. Everything, the coffee is going to cost 20% more, whatever else, bananas will cost 20% more, you name it, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? Almost everything you buy will go up by 20% with no increase in your compensation. It's going to be, even if it goes up somewhat, it will lag. And so particularly people of difficult economic circumstances, right, that's the inflation story. The depression story in this is that it will be so hard to produce anything, and that people that formerly were, catering to Canadian tourists, they won't have a job anymore. The unemployment rate will go up a lot, and the GNP of the country will decline because the stimulus of all these goods coming in will be barbershops will close, whatever. We formerly had all these products that were really expensive. Now we can't do it. I can't run my Ford dealership. I'm going to have to put people go, whatever. People will be frightened about investing. So we have a combination of inflation and depression in the middle of all this stuff. And right now, I'll finally make this comment, the numbers have not been considered in my opinion. I just don't see numbers. And you could say this looks like this is what's going to happen to the national income. This is the standard of living in the country. This is whatever the standard of living is going to be. And because of all the financial hit, the standard of living should decrease. And when it decreases, it's going to be extremely difficult for any Republican, Trump follower to maintain office. A 10% decrease in the standard of living certainly should be a wake-up message to this type of policy. And I don't think the policy's been vetted. I've also heard all kinds of stories. I've heard, for instance, that there's a liberal idea to get a depression. Depression right now, with a rebound by the next election, some sinister ideas, maybe this is a way to cause a depression. It certainly did with Herbert Hoover. This was a Herbert Hoover policy. Okay, back to you. Comments on Herbert Hoover? Is this going to cause inflation or depression?
It's going to be stagflation. It's both. You're absolutely right. I mean, this is a phenomenon that is going to be absolutely devastating to everyone. We're looking at unemployment probably, the number I saw today was it's probably going to jump from 4 to 7%, which is huge. We're talking massive disruptions of local economies. People are going to be let go. The first people to be in line like are going to be some of Trump's most ardent supporters, right? It's going to be the working poor that are going to be hit the hardest. Then it's going to be the middle class, which has already shrunk dramatically over the last few decades. The only scenario in which any of this policy makes sense is if you are trying to destroy the United States dollar's value so that you can use it to buy things like cryptocurrency. And that seems to be a whole sinister line.
I won't have a lot of time for that, but I will speak up just to say that's a terrible idea. Cryptocurrency is terrible, bad. And in fact, I don't want to be too mean to President Trump, but apparently he's doing some Bitcoin investment.
He and First Lady both have their own.
Very rough.
Almost everyone in the major figure in this company has their own
Bitcoin is bad for the U.S. dollar. Bad. And if the U.S. stops being the reserve currency, that's really the temple will crash. And having said those things, maybe I've been a little too negative, but not by much. So I'll challenge you. How are we ripped off? Can you maybe just try that for what was the rip off? Only that point. What was the bad thing happening in the country?
There is no ripoff, but what you could argue as a ripoff is that we are buying more from other countries than we are selling back to them. We have a negative balance of trade.
I know that. Do you think anything's related to tariffs? Is that causing the negative balance of trade?
tariffs causing a lack of tariffs might be because we have in a free trade agreement or a low tariff scenario, it is easier to import goods cheaply.
So do you think that this balance of trade issue would not be present with appropriate tariffs?
We would still have a balance of trade because by virtue of geography and by virtue of climate, there are certain things that we cannot make in this country, we cannot produce in this country. We have to import 80% of our aluminum because we don't have the aluminum reserves. That's not something we can magically invent. We don't have the climate to grow coffee enough to meet the needs of the country. Avocados, bananas, all these fruits and vegetables. We're going to go back to a world where we have really seasonal vegetables, and that's it. We can buy oranges at the grocery store year round because of free trade, because of those deficits.
Right. Good point. I'm going to have to conclude at this point, and I will end by saying that this is a very, very treacherous path. It's a very, very treacherous path, and sometimes there's a great merit in backing out. I hope the nation's policymakers are aware if these terrible things come to pass, we do something expeditiously and quickly. Well, okay. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, Rick, for being with us.
Thanks for having me.